Kitsi, you want to, yeah, Kitsi, Vijay join? I should call Ernest, Wesley, and Pudu. In fact, we have like 20 people connected. Yes. Now, I just want to ask a quick question. Now, in any country or in Sri Lanka, do you know that, do they have any kind of a tracking of budget, whether they have done the budget correctly? Is there real like accounting and budget comparisons? Do you know?
Absolutely, they do. In projects, I believe, because in projects that we work here, for example, say for the school boards, right? And they know at least like 2 years before, they ask from the school boards the sort of maintenance they need to do in each and every school, right? And after that, they allocate the budget, and then before that budget cycle expires, about like 2 months before, they send another notice to each and every school, hey, you have this much budget still left. And so they are saying, that's why I said, like, so they are definitely accounting that, and then they ask, like, okay, you have this much budget left, and have you got anything more to do? Like, so sometimes like the consultants immediately jump in, and the school board has huge, like each and every school board has huge maintenance stuff, right? Not like in Sri Lanka. So they immediately jump in and they say, yeah, and there are this stuff like they want to spend, and then they get that allocation right away. So I believe they do the proper accounting.
No, right, that is fine, but what I'm saying is, now, I'm sure they will have similar thing here, but is there any formal, for example, process where people know what happened? For example, something like, how do you say that in normal accounting? Tracking or standard variance analysis, something like that, how much allocated, how much real expenditure. Is it public?
Oh, that's available. Like the Fraser Institute that I'm contributing to, they always, like, whenever we have a meeting, they get to the computer and they immediately show, hey, here this is, like, for City of Hamilton, for this type of task, this was the budget allocated, and this is, so they, I'm pretty sure they do, because I have seen it.
But do you have in Sri Lanka, do you have that?
No, actually, this is the kind of thing which I have been talking about that Sri Lanka should introduce. In fact, I was going through a document. I didn't put it on the screen for you to see, which I downloaded. For 2016, they have made an estimate for the expenditure. I mean, it's not ministry by ministry, but for the different government officers. So there's a list of about 700. I saw His Excellency the President. There is a expenditure item which is 2.6 million rupees. I don't know for what that is. So that's the kind of very okay. Somebody might say it's very comprehensive because they have considered all the 600 or 700 different government institutions that are there, and they have estimated the revenue and they have estimated the expenditure. But it is for what purpose? Is the question, because like Ernest explained, that if they have really found out from those people who are running the schools, what are their maintenance expenditures for the next period, and probably whatever, if it's a fully government funded organization, then they should know even the salaries and various other expenses worked out in detail, and based on that, government can really make a very good budget using the current technology. Because I think you are an IT person, probably you can figure that out better than me. And very easy, if all these departments are connected, the budget can be compiled from a bottom-up basis rather than going from top-down basis. Because now it's a top-down kind of budget that is being done by the finance ministry, and that is why they are bringing in sometimes meaningless taxes, which I mean, half the things which were brought up in last two budgets wouldn't be implemented because they have not even consulted the line ministries and the departments who are really going to implement those. Yeah. So that wouldn't happen if there had been a proper coordination and a bottom-up approach, and that is something government must introduce, because probably that will also draw their attention to the useless way of structuring our cabinets and government departments. Because actually ministries and departments have been haphazardly and in an ad hoc manner has been worked out. As a result of that, responsibilities are not properly defined. So this itself will get highlighted when they try to prepare budgets, because there may be certain expenditure which is totally unnecessary. There may be even expenditure that is being repeated from 2 different departments or 2 different ministries. And also sometimes there are a lot of obstacles if somebody tries to do something. In fact, doing business index, ease of doing business index, Sri Lanka has fallen down mainly because of this kind of meaningless divisions of responsibility and authority into various ministries, just to keep them together as a political, ministry is a political incentive, and it is not because it is needed. So this problem is actually getting reflected even in the budget. So if you, of course, somebody might argue you can't put the budgeting process right without the proper restructuring of the government. But we have to make a start somewhere. At least budget is being regularly presented every year and is being debated and passed by the parliament. So at least to that extent, it gets wider attention. So that may be an opportunity to use and probably put the whole planning and budgeting process right.
Okay, so now actually I want to say something now. For example, now compared to previous years, now the idea of the new minister trying to consult people is a good thing. However, if you look at what they have kind of the format they have asked is very like narrow, and not maybe they are not very interested in getting real suggestions, because they have asked you to send by email or registered post. So it's very like a low level consultation. That is why, to demonstrate, to start now we can do more interactive, more consultative like this. If we had more time, for example, could have hold a few rounds more like in a structured manner. But as Kitsiri mentioned, we want to start somewhere and show that we even get this very narrow opportunity to do some public consultation. If Ernest can remember, we did the same thing for Constitution Consultancy Committee. We did we didn't have high participation, but again, they got consultation from the public, but it's only physically in different cities. Now, as Kitsiri mentioned, the importance of Sri Lankans living abroad. There are 2 million or more than 2 million people, very achieved professionals in different fields. So the idea of this session is to give them opportunity to at least discuss and share the ideas. If you can do this more frequently, more organized way, more structured way, we can also make this formal forum for the the ministry. Now, having said that, I also want to know that tell you that now with Colombo University, there's this MBA alumni. They have a formal pre-budget and post-budget kind of a physical meeting with the minister before the meeting and after the meeting. I have not participated, but I see our alumni guys, they organize every year. So now, for example, if you want, we can go and do a presentation, but there are very few. This is also kind of elite consultation, but as we wanted to do, we want to do this more in a more ground level, top to bottom to top kind of approach of consultation. Okay, so any other ideas? Lee, you want to say something, Lee? Lee is back.
Sorry, I went to try and send a few invitations a bit last minute to some people I thought might be interested.
Okay, that's great.
I mean, before I left, some of the things we talked about were, the low level of like entrepreneurship, maybe. In Colombo, I see a lot of entrepreneurship happening, and there's more and more kind of meetings and discussions about what people are doing. Unfortunately, a lot of it is just digital, You know, so apps or web platforms are the be all and end all, and a lot of people are basically just cloning other platforms that they see elsewhere, which is where we're lacking that creative talent. But on that note, and with a you know, I'm saying this because one of the things that really needs to happen in financial regulation is working out the banking system so as to be much more supportive of small businesses, to enable a lot more digital transactions that happen in a way that's affordable for the scale of the economy in Sri Lanka, like the kind of microtransaction thing. Currently, the regulations with the banks and it just makes that kind of thing really impossible, which is a barrier then to people starting small businesses that might be creative consultancies or might be, you know, guided by a creative hand, if you like. I mean, you know, you mentioned Kitsuri, the engineers and things doing things, but there's innovation, but innovation without design is kind of lost also, you know. You can think up clever ways of making a hinge, but if you don't design it nicely, and I mean that in the broadest sense, design the materials, design the functionality, design how it's manufactured, your hinge will just not work. So for me, the kind of creative aspect of innovation is really, really important and needs to be much more supported.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Now, in addition to what Lee said, one gentleman already sent us a proposal asking, for example, to talk about PayPal. Still, PayPal is not you know, allowed in Sri Lanka. So maybe as Lee mentioned, you know, the obstacle of making micro payments. So this kind of payment of financial transactions should be also encouraged, particularly encouraged. Now, as we already discussed, SME is one of our main target audience. So we are looking at small businesses who are not digital but also physical and trying to do some value addition. Okay, Sachintan, right? Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, Sachintan. So can you introduce yourself quickly before going to the next person?
I'm working as a consultant at Consultation Telecom. Basically, I'm an engineer and I have around 7+ years professional experience. So currently, I'm working as a consultant at Hutchison.
Where do you work?
Hutchison.
Okay. Okay. Right. So you have a chat option. So if you can't, for example, yeah, some people are already talking. So please type your you know, idea also in the chat while you are talking or when you are not talking. Okay. And who wants to talk? Kitsuri, Ernest?
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Yeah.
So we talk about the budget allocation requirements, and then one thing is this. You know, Sri Lanka doesn't have a very good media actually. Like in many other countries. Probably Lee can explain us here in this thing. You know, like for example, in Canada, right? We had a gas plant, and that it took about like $1 billion to set up that gas plant, and after that, like they had to relocate that, and then when they started relocating it, they had to spend another about like $3 billion just to relocate it. And the government was going to do it secretly. But we have a very vibrant media here, like the talk show hosts, basically, not the written media, the talk show hosts. They have the information, they pick it up, and so it became a big issue, and that relocation of the gas plant stopped finally, right? And unfortunately, until everything gets to the worst situation in Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan media don't pick that up, and it goes to the worst situation, and only then they talk about it and start finger pointing.
Ernest,
you know,
for clarification, now the culprit here is the government or private sector? The grass.
It's a private sector. It is a private sector, but there is even the government. For example, CBC is a government-funded media, right? But they have their own freedom to anytime, criticize the government,
Right.
and they have no problem with that.
Why I want to ask is now, for example, one area we are looking at is, for example, for future activism kind of thing, that our guys are already attacking only to the government. Whereas private sector, the corporate kind of activism is not very common. There are few people who do that, but now we don't really, for example, we don't attack, let's say, dialogue or any big company, even they make mistakes or blunders. So one, for example, citizen activism should be targeting towards corporate sector. They are unethical and citizen friendly policies, plus also, as you said, also media, because mainstream media still they are kind of mafia. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, mainstream media in Sri Lanka, in every night you can see all these politicians coming to the TV and they're just bashing each other, right? But that's not proper media. The proper media guys, like real good talk show hosts, they are actually politicians. They are much ahead of the politicians. Exactly. They have really good ideas and they have very good alternatives, right? And so what kind of allocation in this budget to set up that kind of I don't think it will require a lot, right? But the budget should itself allocate some money to set up a vibrant media like that. And maybe, I don't know, I would like to hear from Lee on that. How does he feel as a foreigner?
Yeah, I mean, on the whole, obviously I don't really watch much Sinhala news or Tamil, but the English medium newspapers are really awful, basically. But I don't know whether you guys have come across Raw, the online news platform, which is gaining a lot of traction and is feels much more like real journalism, actually.
Lee, I am talking about, have you heard about the talk shows? For example, say Alan Jones and then Jerry Springer and then Jerry Yeager, that kind of talk show hosts. That's a huge culture. I think Lasantha Vikramatunga was the only one who started that kind of thing, but unfortunately he couldn't continue that in radio. And so do you see something happening like that in Sri Lanka in your view?
Not that I've seen, but then I don't really watch TV, and I listen to the BBC. I listen to kind of BBC radio, but on the BBC, for example, you get a lot of that sort of thing, serious political discussion that happens, and others. People are challenged to answer for their actions on the radio all the time. But then that's right. BBC.
We have a few programs, for example, Face the Nation and stuff like that. But the problem is now the Sirasa is seen as they have their own agenda. So now, for example, this guy, what is his name? The new lawyer who is like a whistleblower. So he's been interviewed on Supreme Court decisions and everything. But I don't think they are also very credible because they are trying to, of course, they are like anti-corruption, but people know that Maharaja has their own clear agenda, for example. So
their agenda. That's right.
Yeah. But that thinking is there. So few programs are there, English and Sinhala.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So
they don't.
Yeah. Okay. So
they don't have following like the American or Canadian shows where the hosts are very powerful personalities, sense of humor. Trump, sometimes even Trump attack them. So these kind of actually now our guys are still very pro and even sometimes under the payroll of the government or even by political parties. So it's
that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So people nowadays, like sometimes they don't read print media, right? And they just go by sound bites mainly, like they just look at internet headlines and stuff like that. But actually the guys who are traveling, right, they always they listen to radio, and the radio is a very powerful media. And these talk shows hosts I have seen, they're very powerful guys.
Yeah.
And okay, since the other thing in this budget allocation, so I would like to know, like, what sort of budget allocation they are going to do for the companies in Sri Lanka, right? The established companies in Sri Lanka to go abroad. I'm talking about, like, when you say go abroad, at least to India, at least to Malaysia, or to regional countries. The reason I have been very frustrated, I have been writing this for long right now. Last 10 years, for example, Sri Lanka's telecom, Sri Lanka Telecom has been, every June they are publishing a massive profit. They say, oh, they put the chairman's name on the paper, and they declare a massive profit. But if you look at last 10 years with the voice over IP technology, right? Lot of telecoms in many countries expanded their footprint to whole bunch of other countries, and with the support of some are, like, for example, Malaysia Telecom, with the support of Malaysian government, and India Airtel with the support of Indian government too, and they expanded to 28 countries last 10 years. Unfortunately, Sri Lanka has not even expanded their services, at least to Maldives, at least to, Myanmar or some other countries. And so these are basically big government fat cats, right? And we all know that. And they're not thinking, they're not visionaries, and they just sit there and then get the salary and go. And they are big, Sri Lanka Telecom is a big profitable company. So I would like to know what sort of initiatives the government is going to take in this type of business expansions, and is there any allocation in the budget for that? Or maybe, like, we have got a telecom guy right now, like, joined, and maybe, I don't know if he has any idea about that.
Actually, now we had a discussion today about the Indian companies trying to expand to other countries where we have not been able. So yes, now I have in my class. He was complaining about VO IPs taking their business, Viber and such tools, but they have not been able to proactively respond even inside the market. So they are kind of concerned about losing revenue for international calls, for example. But as you said, there's no idea of going outside, but try to protect their own territory. That's their mentality now. Yes, you can, Sachin, you can say.
Yeah, exactly what you have told is correct. Especially these mobile operators, the country like Sri Lanka, we are just 22 million. For the 22 million population, we have 5 operators. It means 5 times we have spent the investment on capex, as well as 5 times we are spending money on the operational expenses. So it's a massive amount, and all these vendors, especially these days Chinese vendors, Huawei and ZTE, those 2 vendors, they are getting almost 80% of the revenue for their equipments and all. So if you see, actually, even here, the number one, the so-called number one operator Dialog, they are struggling to get the ROI, and still their EBITDA is negative only. So with the mobile, as a mobile operator, it's really hard to protect their boundaries with the internet, and with this kind of, maybe for a country like small country like Sri Lanka, maybe 2 physical operators are well enough. And then the other operators, what they can do is they can share the spectrum with those physical 2 operators, and then they can run as a virtual operators. That would be the most beneficial for all 5 operators, as well as for the customers as well. And still, Dialog, if you take this Dialog not the broadband, the fixed line, as well as the SLT fixed line, they still have the very good profit. So countries like Africa or maybe this Bhutan, Bangladesh, so those type of countries we can target. We have enough market to grow in those kind of countries. So of course, as Mr. Kitsri said, we can think about that.
But Kitsiri's point, thank you very much. Yeah, but Kitsiri's point is now what are the governments kind of pushing up or supporting mechanisms? Now, for example, I know banks have gone back, like commercial bank, maybe you own Sampath Bank. The commercial bank is definitely in Bangladesh and I think also in Maldives. Also, uh, in addition to banks, hotels, Jetfin, Aitken, Spence, they have international expansion. But I'm sure they are also complaining against the government that they don't support. So this is a very good point we have to add, like some kind of we can't say subsidies, but some supporting, enhancing system for Sri Lankan companies to do operations in the region.
Chaminda, when I meant, like, for example, let me explain you one thing. In like, we don't have to go as an operator to a country, like a telecom operator. You don't have to go as an operator. For example, BSNL India, right? What they did, they got a stake of Rogers Telecommunication, and for the infrastructure development in Canada. That what they're doing, like they're running all the fiber networks, right? And they are doing a lot of they're investing on that. They are one of the investment partners. And then Airtel, right, acquired Comcast network, part of that Comcast. Now that was in 2008, and now Airtel is delivering the contents, like digital contents to some subscribers in Florida area, right? And we should not think that, okay, we go to a country and set up as a business and provide the services to end users right away. No, we should partner or get a stake of some other company, right? At the same time, Canadian Telecommunications, Bell Canada, for example, right now they announced, like, they are going to India too, to provide the rural area infrastructure developments. So it's a kind of like, okay, you cannot protect your boundary at all nowadays. Like, there's no way to do that. All what you need to do, like, yeah, okay, they are coming here, and we also go and we expand. And the government has no initiative to do that. Government has no sort of like a political backing or any allocation, I think, for these businesses to go abroad.
No, okay, see again.
Mr.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I say something?
While I
No, let Sachin to go. Sachin, go ahead, and then we'll go to Kitsiri.
Yeah, actually, if you consider this telecom industry, none of the companies, all 5 players in Sri Lanka, none of them are 100% Sri Lankan companies now. So the initiatives also to be, I think, start from the to be actually, even though if we go for some other, if we expand our boundaries, most of the shares or stake will be, again, it will go to some outside companies or other countries. So rather than, and of course I am 100% agreeing with Mr. Kitsiri, like that government is not initiating this, and they are doing the they are trying to grab money from the other, wherever possible they are trying to grab that only. So other than that, some other companies, some other potential markets, like some software industry which is connected to the service, if you see the pick me or something like that, for example, that's coming out in my mind. So if we can boost something like that, service oriented software development or something like that, and then we can expand it to the other countries, like even India or Bangladesh, the South Asian countries, and as well as we can target the Middle East and Africa as well. Then probably we can get a good enough margin, as well as it will be 100% Sri Lankan company, so it will help to boost the Sri Lankan economy?
Okay, so
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, I have 2 points. Because actually what my namesake Ernest, what he said is really important, because actually in the last discussion we had, we pointed out clearly that government has no industrial policy in this country, right? Now I add to that, now what Ernest is talking about is an extension of that policy. We are even looking at taking the industries to the world. So that won't happen unless we get our priorities right. Because this is where this vision, 2025 vision or 2035 vision or whatever, I may not live to see any of those. We need to get a clear strategy for development of this country. Because the only thing that is being talked about is converting it into 5 hubs. Now the 5 hubs are becoming 7 hubs. I don't know what these hubs are for. Probably we'll have only the hub without the spokes. Without the spokes, we won't have wheels. So unless we have established in the South Asian market with liberal policies, where, okay, the Indians can come and invest in Sri Lanka and do business, Sri Lankans should be able to go to India and do business. So there we have to identify our core strengths. What are the core strengths of our local private sector? So far, what they have developed. If not, by bringing in what Lee is talking about, the innovation in design thinking, design, product design, etc., can we develop with our resources certain core strengths where we are really have a competitive advantage? And then those are the things we can take abroad. And that is how, if you really look at BSNL had gone and laid a fiber optic network between Canada to USA, and then Airtel uses that opportunity to ride with the content. So because we have already got those competitive strengths as core strengths in those companies. So, but can we name one company, probably other than the distilleries where we know how to distill arak? Probably we can go and do that in other countries. Other than that, what are the industries where we have developed the core strength which can be taken to the world? And at the same time, this hub thing is not going to work unless we are really opening, liberalizing, and at the same time bringing up our standards to international standard levels, like not only in electrical engineering and plumbing and stuff, but even in regulatory areas, and also even in the service sector, which where we can really get into. We need to be a true international competitor, and for that we need to identify going back to the same word, the core strengths, and develop those so that Sri Lanka has some value to other people to come and either do business here or to come and invest here. So
Okay.
that's
That's
really.
Now I just want to ask you. Now you work for Dankoto Porcelain as a CEO. Now I remember those days the porcelain industry was considered a trust industry. So has there that kind of special treatment by the government to go export or international markets like porcelain or tea? Are there schemes which can be duplicated?
Well, to tell you very frankly, the only support was Dankoto had the BOI status, and as a result of that, we could clear the imports without having to pay import duty. And also, we had certain concessionary taxes, which are not going to be the norm in the future, right? Other than that, on the technological marketing, everywhere else, there was absolutely no support. It was all developed by Dankoto itself. So that is where I could really contribute heavily, because that's an area which was, I would say, not managed properly, because having gone in for a partnership with a Japanese company, they totally dependent on the Japanese to develop. But the Japanese are also again outsourcing that capability from Korean companies and buying houses and things like that, which was not working well. So that is where I spoke to the dealers and distributors which we have been working for some time, and then through them got some ideas and got a strategy. Because what they said was, we have a very good white porcelain, but the white porcelain itself cannot be sold unless it is converted into modern designs, which has both utility value, aesthetic value, functional value, and whatever the other aspects Lee was talking about. So we did the professional designing, professional development, and took the products into international exhibitions, presented in a professional manner. We wanted to get out of that third world country.
You are saying that there's no special pushing from the government to go overseas. Okay, that's
absolutely. There was no support during my time, at least. That was 2001 to 2004.
Okay, so 4 minutes.
I would like to add a few points to Mr. Kitsri's points. In Sri Lanka, here we don't have a proper economic policy. We don't have a proper foreign affairs policy. So without, each and every time government changes, everything changes. So you see, even what happened to this policy.
Okay, we'll come back to the general issue. Sorry for the disturbance. We have only 3 minutes. I want to go to Fairuz to get some ideas. Do you have any?
Okay.
Fairuz.
Yes, in fact, I'm also with Mr. I couldn't recall the name, Mr. Kitsri, regarding this the handling the policies on the operations, that how they can manage their own. Sri Lankan is one of the good example. If the Sri Lankan is screwed up by previous government, why can't this government absorb the cost and start from the fresh book? Maybe they can go for a legal action and put those people behind the bar. But government is not willing to do that. What happens?
I was talking about Sri Lankan Airlines. Okay.
Yeah. What happens to the Matala Airport and the Hambantota Harbour and the oil tank at Trincomalee? I'm not talking politics out here. If we are capable, those are the opportunities that we could make use of it. If Chinese come and do the business out here, and if Indian come and do the business out here, why can't we do it? Not fully, but at least we can have the control of it. But here, what we could see is like just a one-time transaction with the commission. The deal is over. I mean, the benefit that we are going to gain, it is invisible or very marginal. It's not going to contribute in any of the expenses. So unless government think fresh and start doing that on their own, I don't think that there should be policy change out here.
Okay, Fairuz, so I need to also just add something on what he said. Now, Sri Lankan Airlines is a very good example of our status. If you look back and talk about it, we were very proud of having Sri Lankan Airlines as the best airline in the region. And we sometimes heard that we are like being the caterers for Emirates, and we have been part of Emirates Group. So we had a lot of history of being successful regional international company, most friendliest cabin crew. But now we know really it is bleeding, no? So it's a lot of money, taxpayers' money is spent on maintaining airline, as a going concern. Now, what we saw early now, for example, if you look at Sri Lankan Airline versus Jet Airlines, the Indian airline started as a budget airline. Now it is international. It goes to United States and Europe. So it has taken over all of the short distance travel. So if you look at Sri Lankan Airlines as an example, the government priority is to keep it flying, not capturing other market. If you look at what we discussed, Sri Lankan Airlines should be able to provide catering service, maybe a maintenance services to regional airlines. But our now thinking is, can Sri Lankan Airline be a viable organization? So we have lost what could have done, as regional organization. Okay, so we have less than 1 minute. We come back one more time, and then more focused discussion on proposals on the budget. Okay, so please come back with the same URL.